My mom always saw me as a burden and favored my sister. Now that I'm married and pregnant, she secretly invited my ex to a family dinner to rescue me. This story makes more sense if I start by explaining my complicated relationship with my mom, Laura. From as far back as I can remember, I never called her mom like most children do. She insisted that we call her by her name, something I never fully understood when I was little. Now, as an adult, I think it was a way of keeping herself distant, as if the title of mom implied an emotional responsibility that she was never willing to assume. Laura had my sister, Chloe, and me under very different circumstances. Chloe was born when Laura was 26 years old, already married to her second husband, Marco. It was a more or less stable marriage, and Laura always says that Chloe was planned. In contrast, I was born when Laura was 19, the product of a casual relationship with a guy named Alex, who disappeared as soon as he found out she was pregnant. Laura never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was an accident. Of course, she never used that word directly, but her resentment was evident in every look and every condescending word. While Chloe was her dream daughter, I was some kind of reminder of her mistakes. When I was 6 years old, Laura met Marco. He was a kind and patient man, someone who seemed to want to compensate for the lack of affection I received from my mom. Although Marco tried to treat me like his daughter, it was never enough to erase the constant feeling of being an add-on. Chloe and I had a warm and close relationship, something I never experienced with Laura. In our house, Chloe was always the center of attention. She had the best birthday parties, new clothes, and expensive toys. I received hand-me-downs from my cousins, or at best, a practical gift. I remember once, when I was 10 years old, I asked my mom for a dress I saw in a store. It wasn't expensive, but I liked it a lot. Laura looked at me and said, "What do you need a new dress for? Nobody sees you anyway." That phrase stuck with me. It was her way of minimizing my desires, as if they weren't worth it. The worst thing was that Chloe was there watching everything, and Laura ended up buying her a similar dress, but nicer, because according to her, Chloe did have important events. Over time, I learned to lower my expectations. I never asked her for anything and avoided creating conflicts, but I always felt a pang of jealousy when I saw how she treated Chloe. Despite everything, I tried to love her. After all, she wasn't to blame for Laura idolizing her and treating me like a ghost. The situation did not improve. Although Marco tried to include me in family activities, Laura always found an excuse to leave me out. I remember one summer when Chloe turned 13. Laura organized a big trip to Disney World just for her, saying it was a reward for her good grades. I wasn't invited. According to Laura, the trip would be expensive, and it didn't make sense for me to go because I wouldn't enjoy it as much as Chloe. My biological dad, Alex, was never present. Laura said he was useless and that it was better that he stayed away. When I turned 18, I contacted him on my own. It was an awkward but revealing encounter. He told me that he did want to be in my life, but Laura kept him away from the beginning, making it clear that she didn't want his help. That conversation opened my eyes. My mom not only treated me with indifference but had decided that I didn't even deserve a stable father figure. In my 20s, I moved out on my own. The distance from Laura was a relief, although I always felt a knot in my chest every time I saw her treating me like a stranger at family gatherings. While Chloe continued to be the star, I was just the daughter who had made it on her own. But not because Laura supported me, but because I had learned to survive without her. Everything changed a year ago when I met Ian, the man who is now my husband. Ian is sweet, patient, and most importantly, he makes me feel valued. Unlike Laura, he doesn't see my achievements as luck or coincidence but as the result of my effort. When I introduced him to Laura, her reaction was cold. She looked at me and said, "I thought you'd go out with someone more sophisticated." From that moment on, her attitude towards Ian was a mixture of passive aggressiveness and contempt disguised as innocent comments. My relationship with Ian progressed quickly. He not only made me feel safe but also helped me heal the wounds that Laura had left in me for years. In less than a year, we got engaged. When we announced the engagement, Laura's reaction was as predictable as it was disappointing. Chloe was excited, and Marco seemed genuinely happy. But Laura just smiled with a fake grimace and commented, "Don't you think it's a little rushed? You don't want to make the same mistake I did." It was her subtle way of calling me a mistake, as she always did. Ian noticed my discomfort, but instead of confronting Laura, he took my hand under the table and gave me a supportive squeeze. That night, as we were driving home, he looked at me and said, "You don't have to let her opinion define your happiness. This is about us, not about her." At that moment, I knew I was with the right person. We started planning our wedding. We decided that it would be something intimate, only close family and dear friends. When I told Laura this, her first reaction was to be outraged. "Just a small ceremony? What kind of wedding is that? Chloe will need an elegant wedding when it's her turn. You can't ruin the family tradition with something so basic." I was perplexed. Since there had never been a family tradition of big weddings, it seemed that she was just looking for an excuse to criticize me. In the months leading up to the wedding, Laura barely got involved in the preparations. Chloe, on the other hand, was a great support. She helped me choose my dress, organized the invitations, and was by my side every step of the way. Although Laura always tried to keep us divided, Chloe and I had developed a strong bond. However, even with her support, I couldn't ignore Laura's shadow and her constant disapproval. The wedding was beautiful. Chloe was my maid of honor, and Marco gave a moving speech that made me cry. Laura, as expected, stayed in the background, smiling stiffly during the photos and avoiding any meaningful interaction. At the end of the ceremony, while everyone was congratulating us, Laura pulled me aside and with her typical coldness said, "I hope you don't regret this decision. Ian seems too good to be true. Sometimes men like him have secrets." Her words were not only unfair but completely out of place. What kind of mother sows doubts at such a happy moment? I chose to ignore her and continue enjoying my day. But those words were etched in my mind, not because I believed them, but because they showed me once again that Laura couldn't tolerate my happiness. It was clear that for her, any decision of mine was a threat to her ego or an excuse to belittle me. A few months after the wedding, Ian and I received the most unexpected surprise. I was pregnant. Although it wasn't something we planned right away, we were both delighted. From the beginning, Ian was an incredible support, and we started preparing for this new stage with enthusiasm. Announcing the pregnancy was a moment I will never forget. Although for very different reasons, we invited Laura, Marco, Chloe, and my biological dad, Alex, to a dinner at our house to break the news. We were nervous but excited. When we finally revealed the news, Chloe literally screamed with joy and hugged me so hard that she almost made me cry. Marco and Alex were just as excited, both sharing anecdotes and advice about fatherhood. But Laura, as always, had to be the exception. First, she remained silent with an expression that wavered between surprise and annoyance. Then, she let out a dry chuckle and said, "You didn't want to wait a little longer? I don't know if you're ready for this." The whole table went silent. Even Marco, who always tried to mediate, shot her a look of disapproval. But Laura continued, "I mean, you're barely starting. Being parents is hard, especially if you don't have the right support." It was her way of insinuating that somehow I wasn't capable. Ian intervened with his calm but firm voice. "We're not asking for support, Laura. We're sharing happy news. I think we should celebrate it, not question it." It was the first time that someone in my life had challenged Laura like that, and I felt deeply grateful to Ian. After that dinner, Laura seemed to distance herself even further. She didn't respond to my messages or ask questions about the pregnancy. In a way, it was a relief. However, Chloe warned me that Laura was acting strange. She didn't want to give me details but assured me that she was on my side. No matter what happened, what came next was the event I never imagined, a family dinner organized by Laura. Supposedly to fix things. I thought that maybe she was trying to reconcile or, for the first time, get involved in my life in a positive way. But what happened that night made it clear that her intentions were anything but noble. The invitation to Laura's dinner came out of the blue. It was rare for her to organize something specifically for me, and even more so that she did it under the pretext of celebrating my pregnancy. Chloe called me to ask if I knew what it was about. But I was just as bewildered. "Maybe she's trying to change," I suggested, although I didn't even believe those words myself. Chloe just sighed. "Just promise me that you won't be surprised if something weird happens." When Ian and I arrived at Laura's house that night, everything seemed normal at first. Marco greeted us at the door with his usual warmth. Chloe was already there, and the table was decorated with candles and an elegant tablecloth. It seemed that Laura had really made an effort. Maybe, I thought, she's trying to make amends. That hope lasted exactly 15 minutes. After serving dinner, Laura started talking about how proud she was of Chloe and her recent achievements at university. It didn't bother me. I had always known that Chloe was her favorite. But when the conversation turned to me and Ian, her tone changed. Well, I can't say I expected you to be the first to give me a grandchild, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I guess surprises come in all kinds of forms. Ian, as always, remained calm, but I could feel his hand squeezing mine under the table. Chloe rolled her eyes and tried to steer the conversation towards something lighter. But Laura wasn't finished. I just hope you haven't rushed things out of fear of losing him, she added, looking directly at me. My heart sank. That was her way of insinuating that I wasn't enough for Ian, that maybe I had planned the pregnancy to trap him. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Laura got up immediately with an almost anxious excitement. Oh, I think our surprise has just arrived, she said, leaving the room. Ian looked at me curiously, and Chloe frowned. Surprise? She whispered. I could only shrug my shoulders. A few seconds later, Laura returned to the dining room accompanied by someone who froze me. Adrian. My ex-boyfriend. He seemed as uncomfortable as I was, standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and an apologetic expression on his face. Look who came to see you. Emma, Laura said with a laugh that seemed too pleased with herself. Ian tensed up next to me, and Chloe literally dropped the fork she was holding. What the hell is he doing here? She asked, breaking the silence before I could. Adrian raised his hands as if trying to calm the situation. Emma, I didn't know this was a family dinner. Your mom just said she wanted me to stop by to say hello. That it was important. His voice was low, almost ashamed. At that moment, I understood what was happening. Laura hadn't organized this dinner to celebrate my pregnancy. She had orchestrated all of this to make me doubt my relationship with Ian. What do you think you're doing, Mom? I said with a firmer tone than I had ever used with her. But Laura, as always, remained in her own world of self-justification. I just thought it would be good for you to see Adrian again before making permanent decisions like having a baby. You should be sure of what you want in life. Ian finally spoke, his tone calm but loaded with tension. I think Emma has made it clear what she wants. I'm here, and we're happy. I don't understand why you think this is appropriate. His voice wasn't aggressive, but his calmness contained a barely contained fury. Laura ignored him completely and turned to Adrian. Tell me, don't you think Emma rushed things a little? You always had such a special connection. Maybe you can still recover what you lost. Adrian was so uncomfortable that he could barely look at me. Laura, I think I made a mistake by coming. This was a bad idea, he said quickly. The silence in the room was deafening. Chloe, who generally tried to mediate our family discussions, finally lost her patience. What the hell is wrong with you? Mom, in what world do you think this is a good idea? Emma is happy. She's married and has a baby on the way. Why can't you just leave her alone? Laura tried to defend herself, saying that she only wanted the best for me. But by then, no one believed her anymore. Marco, who had been quiet until that moment, finally intervened. Laura, this isn't right. If you want to continue with these attitudes, it will be without my support. You've crossed a line this time. Adrian apologized once again and left, leaving me even more confused and humiliated. Ian and I also got up to leave, but not before telling Laura exactly what I thought. This was cruel and selfish. If you ever thought you would recover a relationship with me this way, you were completely wrong. I don't want you interfering in my life anymore. That night, while driving home, Ian hugged me and said, no matter what happens, I'm with you. She can't destroy what we've built. It was a comfort, but also a confirmation of something I had always feared. Laura was not only incapable of supporting me but was willing to sabotage my happiness if it meant regaining some control over me. After that disastrous dinner, I felt emotionally drained. The idea that Laura had crossed so many boundaries just to satisfy her own ego left me confused and hurt. During the following days, she tried to contact me several times. First with messages, then with calls. I ignored most of her attempts. But one of her messages made me stop. Emma, I feel like things were misinterpreted that night. I just wanted to make sure that you're sure of the decisions you're making. Please call me to talk about this like two adults. It was typical of Laura. Instead of admitting that she had done something wrong, she tried to justify her behavior and blame it on a supposed misunderstanding. Ian advised me not to respond, but I decided that it was better to confront her. I wanted to close that chapter once and for all. When I finally agreed to talk to her on the phone, her tone at first was surprisingly conciliatory. She said things like, I didn't want you to feel attacked, and, I'm just worried about you. But as soon as I mentioned Ian, her attitude changed drastically. Emma, you don't understand what I'm saying. Ian is too perfect. Don't you realize? Nobody is like that. Something must be wrong with him. And I just want to protect you. What if you make a mistake like the one I made with your dad? I don't want you to end up regretting it. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Mom, I'm not making any mistakes. Ian is good to me and to our future child. The only thing I regret is having believed that you could change and be part of this stage of my life. She was silent for a few seconds before throwing out her usual card. Is that how you talk to me after everything I've done for you? Do you really think I'm against you? I'm your mother, and I'll always want the best for you. But if you can't see that, then I don't know what else to do. Her tone was a mixture of indignation and manipulation, so familiar that it almost made me doubt for a moment. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for her game. If what you've done lately is your way of wanting the best for me, then I prefer you don't do anything. I'm tired, Mom. Tired of everything I do being questioned or minimized by you. I want you to leave me alone. That conversation ended abruptly, but it made it clear that our relationship would never recover from the damage that she herself had caused. A few weeks later, my baby shower arrived, organized by Chloe. It was a beautiful event, full of love. Chloe had put her heart into the preparations, decorating the house with flowers and pastel colors. Ian and I were excited to share that day with the people who truly supported us. However, when Laura arrived, I noticed something strange in her attitude. She looked restless, almost nervous, and was much quieter than usual. Chloe also noticed it but decided to ignore it so as not to ruin the atmosphere. Everything was going perfectly until the doorbell rang. Chloe went to open the door, and suddenly I heard her voice on the other side of the room. What are you doing here? My heart stopped. It was Adrian again. Laura practically jumped off the sofa to intercept him. Oh, the surprise I mentioned has arrived, she said with a smile that made my blood boil. Everyone in the room was stunned. How was it possible that after everything that had happened at that dinner, Laura had decided to repeat the same trick at my baby shower? Adrian looked mortified. With a low but firm voice, he said, Laura, I thought this time it was something important. I didn't know it would be another attempt at this. It seemed that even he was tired of being used as part of my mother's schemes. Ian, who until then had tried to keep his composure, finally exploded. Are you serious? Laura, again? This is our baby shower. What kind of person does something like this? The tension in the room was palpable. Chloe quickly intervened, standing in front of Laura as if she were a barrier. You know what, Mom? I'm sick of your manipulations. This isn't about you. It's not about Adrian. And it's definitely not your opportunity to sabotage Emma. It's her day, and you're ruining it. Laura tried to defend herself, saying that she only wanted to give me an option. But no one was willing to listen to her anymore. Marco, who until that moment had tried to remain neutral, also intervened. Laura, this is unacceptable. You've gone too far, and I can't continue supporting you if you keep acting this way. Adrian, visibly uncomfortable, apologized and left quickly. Laura, on the other hand, didn't seem to have any intention of leaving until Chloe literally escorted her to the door. After Laura left, everyone made an effort to bring joy back to the event, but the damage was already done. That night, Ian and I talked about the future of our relationship with my mother. We concluded that for the sake of our family, the best thing would be to cut off contact with her completely. After the disaster of the baby shower, I stood firm in my decision to cut off contact with Laura. Ian and I were determined to protect our peace and the happiness of our new family. During the following weeks, I ignored her calls and messages, all full of excuses, justifications, and a good dose of emotional manipulation. One day, while Ian and I were fixing the baby's room, Chloe called me. Her tone was serious, even somewhat worried. Emma, you need to know something. She began. Mom, well, I think she's completely lost it. She called me this morning and said that she was planning to talk to Marco to convince him that you should reconcile with Adrian. She implied that maybe Marco could influence you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why would she do something like that? Marco doesn't even take sides in these things. I responded, trying to stay calm, but Chloe continued, her voice now full of anger. Emma, I don't think you understand. Mom isn't just obsessed with controlling you. It seems like she's looking for ways to destroy everything good you have. Marco doesn't agree with her craziness anymore, but even he is being put in an impossible position. Shortly after that conversation, Marco called me. It was rare for him to do it directly, so I knew that something important was happening. Emma, I need you to know that I'm on your and Ian's side. He told me, Laura is not well. I've tried talking to her, but it seems that she can't accept that she's crossed too many boundaries. I want you to know that I will do everything possible to prevent her from continuing to interfere in your life. I thanked him for his support, but there was something in his tone that worried me. Marco, are you okay? I asked. After a brief silence, he finally spoke. I'm not sure how much longer I can continue in this situation. Laura doesn't listen to anyone. Not to Chloe, not to me, not even to her own friends. It seems that she's convinced that what she's doing is right, even when everyone is telling her otherwise. A few days later, Ian and I received the news that would change everything. Chloe sent me a text message. Brief but forceful. Marco left Mom. At first, I thought it was a joke. But when I called Chloe, she explained what had happened. Apparently, after trying to convince Marco to manipulate me into talking to Adrian again, Marco had had enough. He confronted her, telling her that he could no longer live with someone so full of bitterness and obsessed with controlling others. Laura, as always, tried to blame everyone but herself. But Marco didn't budge. He decided to move in with a friend temporarily while he resolved the divorce proceedings. Although it hurt me to know that their marriage had come to that point, I couldn't ignore the feeling of relief that washed over me. Marco deserved peace as much as I did, and I knew that Laura would never change if no one stopped her. After this, Laura seemed to be left alone. None of the family's close friends wanted to get involved in her drama. And Chloe also decided to distance herself from her. In a last desperate attempt to regain control, Laura appeared at my house unannounced one afternoon. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, and looked like a shadow of the controlling woman she had always been. Emma, please listen, she began with tears in her eyes. I've lost everything, Marco, Chloe, even you. I only wanted to protect you. But now everyone has turned their back on me. Please, give me a chance to fix things. I looked at her in silence for a long moment, processing her words. Was she really sorry, or was it just another tactic to re-enter my life? Ian, who was standing next to me, placed a hand on my shoulder, as if telling me that he was there to support whatever my final decision was. I finally responded, Mom, it's not about everyone turning their backs on you. It's about you pushing them away with your actions. For years, you made me feel like I wasn't enough, like my choices weren't worth anything. And now, even after everything, you're still trying to control my life. I need to protect my family, and that means keeping my distance from you. Laura started to cry, but this time I felt no compassion. I had spent too long letting her tears and manipulations affect me. I told her to leave, and although she protested, she eventually did, leaving behind a feeling of closure that I never thought I would experience. 8 months have passed since that day, and my life has completely changed. Ian and I welcomed our baby, a girl we named Sophie. She is beautiful and healthy, and every day with her is a reminder of how far I've come and all that I've overcome. Chloe and Marco continue to be a great support in my life. Marco has started to rebuild his life away from Laura, and Chloe, as always, is my rock. My biological dad, Alex, has even gotten closer to me since Sophie's birth, and it has been wonderful to see him take on an active role as a grandfather. As for Laura, I haven't heard much from her. Since our last conversation, Chloe told me that she is living alone and that she seems to be dealing with the consequences of her actions. But I'm not interested in knowing more. I've decided to focus on my family and on the love I have around me.